If you've been into cars for even a little while, you've seen it happen. Your friend says they want something fast, something aggressive, something that actually gets respect. They start looking at Mustangs, maybe a BMW, maybe even something like a Supra if they're feeling ambitious. And then, a few months later, they show up in a Mazda Miata. And not just them, it's everywhere. Car meets, TikTok, YouTube builds, parking lots. The same tiny convertible with the same reputation somehow becoming the most common car among young enthusiasts. And it makes you wonder, why? Why does everyone end up here? Because on paper, the Miata doesn't make sense. It's not fast, it's not practical, and it definitely isn't intimidating. But in 2026, the Mazda Miata might actually be one of the smartest car decisions you can make. And today, we're going to break down exactly why. But before we get into it, if you like content that breaks down car culture, psychology, and why people buy the cars they do, hit subscribe. Because this is where we go deeper than just horsepower numbers. Now let's talk about why everyone in their 20s somehow ends up buying a Miata.
Let's start with how it usually begins. Most people in their 20s don't set out to buy a Miata. That's not the dream. The dream is something louder, faster, more aggressive, something that looks good on Instagram. But then, reality hits. Because being a car enthusiast in your 20s in 2026 is expensive. Car prices are still high. Interest rates aren't exactly friendly. Insurance companies, they see your age and just start smiling. And suddenly, that dream car starts looking less realistic. So you start adjusting. Maybe something used, maybe something cheaper, maybe something reliable. And that's when the Miata quietly enters the conversation. Here's the thing about the Miata. It sits in a very specific sweet spot. Used Miatas, especially older NA, NB, and NC models, are still relatively attainable compared to most sports cars. Even in 2026, you can still find decent examples without completely destroying your finances. And that matters, because for most people in their 20s, this isn't your second car. This is your only car. So it has to do everything. And the Miata, surprisingly, does. It's reliable, it's simple, and it's cheap to maintain, which is becoming more and more rare in modern cars, especially as newer vehicles get more complex, more electronic, and more expensive to fix. The Miata doesn't try to be complicated, and that's exactly why it works. Here's where things start to shift, because for a long time, car culture was about one thing: speed. More horsepower, faster 0 to 60 times, bigger turbos. But something changed. Modern cars got too fast. Too assisted, too easy. You can buy a car today that does 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds without even trying. And ironically, that made driving less exciting because the harder something is to master, the more rewarding it feels. And the Miata flips that completely. It's not fast. Most Miatas aren't even breaking 200 horsepower, but that's not the point. Because the Miata forces you to actually drive. Rear-wheel drive, lightweight chassis, manual transmission, no shortcuts. If you want to go fast in a Miata, you have to earn it, and that's what makes it fun.
There's a phrase you'll hear all the time in car culture. It's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow, and the Miata is the perfect example of that. Because you can push it, you can rev it out, you can take corners aggressively, without immediately risking your license or your life. It's forgiving. It's predictable, and it gives you feedback. You feel the road, you feel the steering, you feel everything. And in a world where cars are becoming more isolated, that connection is rare.
Now let's talk about one of the biggest reasons people fall into the Miata rabbit hole: modification. Because if you buy a Miata, you're probably not leaving it stock. The platform has decades of aftermarket support. We're talking suspension setups, turbo kits, superchargers, wide-body kits, track builds, drift builds. Whatever you want to do, there's already a path for it. And more importantly, it's affordable to experiment. You're not risking a $60,000 car, you're learning. And that's a huge part of the appeal, because for many enthusiasts, the Miata isn't just a car. It's their first real project.
But here's something a lot of people overlook. The Miata didn't just become popular on its own. The internet made it explode. Forums, YouTube, TikTok, Build videos, drift clips, track content, memes. The Miata became part of online car culture. And once something becomes shareable, it spreads fast, especially to younger audiences. And suddenly, owning a Miata isn't just about the car. It's about being part of something bigger. Let's be honest, the Miata has always had a reputation. People call it slow, small, not serious. Some people even question your masculinity for driving one. But here's the funny part. Most of the people saying that have never driven one, because the second you actually get behind the wheel, that perception disappears completely.
The smile factor. There's something almost universal about the Miata. Everyone who drives one smiles. It doesn't matter if you're on a back road or just going to get groceries. It makes driving fun again. Not stressful, not competitive, just fun. And in 2026, that feeling is becoming rare.
Now let's zoom out for a second. Because the Miata's popularity isn't happening in a vacuum. The car market is changing. Manual transmissions are disappearing. Cars are getting heavier, more automated, more expensive. And with the rise of EVs, the driving experience is shifting completely, which makes cars like the Miata even more valuable, because they represent something older, something simpler, something real. And for a lot of younger enthusiasts, that's exactly what they're looking for.
But if we're being honest, the real reason people end up buying a Miata goes deeper than specs. It's identity. Every generation has a car that represents them. Something accessible, something customizable, something that lets you be part of a culture. For millennials and Gen Z, the Miata is one of those cars because it's attainable, it's personal, and it's yours.
For a lot of people, the Miata is the beginning. Your first manual, your first project, your first time really learning how to drive. And once that happens, you're in. You understand car culture in a completely different way. So why does everyone in their 20s end up buying a Mazda Miata? Because it checks boxes that most cars don't anymore. Affordable, reliable, engaging, modifiable, but more importantly, it reminds you why you liked cars in the first place. Not because of speed, not because of status, but because of how it makes you feel. And that's why almost nobody regrets it. And now I'm curious, would you actually buy a Miata? Or are you still chasing something faster? Let me know in the comments.